Episode number 69 of Making the Case. The impact of failure. Let's get it. Hey, what's going on, young world? It's your boy, Dr. Jacob Isom, educator, speaker, entrepreneur, content creator, consultant, father, a little bit of everything. Back at you with another episode of Making the Case, man. Hey, we're almost at 70. We're approaching that 100 mark, man, which is exciting, man. For all those that's been with me from the beginning, I appreciate you. For all those that just catching on, and speaking of that, like I want to touch on that for a minute before I get into my opening statement. Like, I don't think people, and I'm finna get into my ego right now. I don't think people realize the game and the information and the perspectives and viewpoints I really be coming with. Like, you know what I mean? It's like one of those things. I hope it's not one of those situations where, like, I literally got to leave this earth before people appreciate what I've brung to the YouTube space, because I'm not going nowhere. Like, but hey, neither here nor there. I appreciate those of you that have subscribed and that's been rocking with me. We're only going to continue to grow and do bigger and better things. So, hey. So today's episode is about failure, man, and how it really impacts us. But before we really get into that, of course, we gotta go over our two channel norms. One, we attack points and not people, and then two, we don't do all that cussing derogatory stuff because we're professional over here. All right. So let me tell you why I decided that this topic was something that we need to go over and discuss. Everybody deals with failure, but really the difference is of how you let failure. Um, do you let it consume you, or do you let it kind of build you and put it into perspective and keep going, right? So in the education sphere, oftentimes we like to say having a growth mindset. And the opposite would be having a fixed mindset. And really that has everything to do with failure because of course in education, it's about pass or fail, right? But in life in general, it's about doing success or failure, right? So the most successful people will tell you, and I saw a quote and I'm gonna paraphrase it because I don't remember the exact quote. I saw a quote that pretty much simply said the most successful people are the ones that pretty much grabbed failure and understood that it was just gonna be a part of their journey and they never gave up. Right. And of course I'm paraphrasing heavily. But the whole notion of not letting failure define you, but let it refine you is kind of the gist of the whole quote. So the most successful people understand how to do that. I know that I fail way more than I succeed, man. Like I've had other business ventures. I've had other things that I did in the past. I used to have a podcast that I kind of put on the back shelf. Like, and so really, what you really want to do is you want to reinvent yourself. Like artists have to do it all the time. Actors have to do it all the time. People that's in the spotlight, right? You have to understand that you have to reinvent yourself. So you got to allow failure to help sculpt you. All right. So in today's episode, what we're going to do is we're going to get into a little science and how pretty much the brain works when it comes to failure and socially, how we kind of relate to failure and, a little bit of everything when we talking about the impact of failure and how it can really affect our psyche, how it can change us, right? So everybody doesn't deal with failure well, but I'm here to say that that is your biggest obstacle to overcome. How you look at failure, right? We're all going to fail. You're going to fail more than you succeed. You have to understand that. Okay. So I have 4 pieces of evidence for you in this episode. And of course, without further ado, let's get into the first piece of evidence, shall we? All right, so let's get into my topic number one. Let me get myself situated. So remember, we're talking about the impact of failure, whether that's the impact of failure on our brain, our body, on our psyche, our ego, right? So I have a article from Psychology Today, of course, one of my favorite sites to go to, one of my go-to sites because they have great articles. And the title is Failure as a Natural State. So I'm assuming they're going to make the case that failure is natural. I would actually agree with that. So let's get into the article and see what it has to talk about. All right. So failure is often seen as a roadblock, but what if it's a natural part of growth, like a baby learning to walk or stumbles our stumbles shape our resilience. In this reflection, we explore the essential role of failure in personal transformation, self compassion, and flourishing. What if embracing our past missteps is the key to moving forward? And I think that is a great analogy as far as like when a baby is learning to walk, it's going to fall over and over until you get the hang of it. That's essentially what failure is, right? If you stick with it, right? But the problem is, I think a lot of people fail and you may fail 5, 10 times, and then you're like, you know what, forget it. But sometimes you have to literally keep failing until you get it. But everybody don't have that type of patience. So we do live in a very microwave society, as I like to call it. In our pursuit of excellence, perfection, and achievement, failure may appear as a shadow we strive to exile rather than integrate. Competitive Western societies often view failure as the opposite of success rather than an integral part of the human journey, which is very true. Yet, if we zoom out and become observer of our experiences, we can recognize failure as a natural and essential aspect of growth. It simply is, right? We're failing all our life, right? To eventually become good and successful at something. So um this morning I came across 2 quotes that made me think about how failure shapes us. This reflection was timely and as I had seen failure play out in the lives of people around me this week. We won't go into these quotes. Well, I'll read the first one. Do not fear failure. Whatever has happened in the past is behind you. Do not worry about it happening again. Before you achieve success, experience of failure is both natural and necessary. Just as a baby learns to walk by falling repeatedly, is this considered failure? So they went back to the baby metaphor. I see. Oh, let's see. Failure as a teacher. Failure is an exceptional teacher. Even when its lessons feel harsh and unpleasant, the sting of failure may linger, tempting us to tie our own self worth to outcome. Yet looking closely reveals opportunity for growth, strength, awaiting cultivation, and wisdom to be gained. And that's another key point that we can't take failure so hard thinking that we are a failure. No, we just failed at that thing, right? So we can't take it so hard. The nature of failure. What does it mean to say failure is a part of is a natural part of life? Let's reflect on Master Xing Ying's analogy of a baby learning to walk. The baby doesn't fail due to a lack of potential or inherent flaws. They fall because falling is an essential part of the learning journey. With each fall, the baby gains strength, coordination, and confidence. Nature beautifully demonstrates that failure is woven into the fabric of growth. A seed that doesn't sprout, a bird's initial attempt at flight, or a predator's missed hunt. These moments of failure are not the end. They are a powerful opportunity to adapt and try again. Thus, failure is a natural and vital to life's relentless pursuit of growth and evolution. And once again, this is just how you look at it, right? Because I mean, failure is a part of life. Just like I believe that life and death is a part of life. We know because we're living, right? But death is a part of life. So I don't look at death as kind of like this horrible thing, right? If we all have to die, then we just gotta process it through our mental and understand that it's going to be everybody time at some point. We have to celebrate people versus looking at it as something that is just like this horrible thing. But that's just how I tend to view it. Failure and resilience. One of the gifts of failure is resilience. Each time we stumble and manage to rise again, we strengthen our perseverance, adaptability, and self trust. Resilience isn't about avoiding failure, but learning how to navigate it. This resilience is particularly crucial in the face of systematic and societal challenges. For marginalized communities, failure is often intensified by external barriers and biases. A person may fail not due to a lack of ability, but because the systems surrounding them are stacked against them. In these instances, resilience requires personal strength and collective action to dismantle those barriers. And that is so true, man. Like when it comes to looking at failure, when you feel like everything is against you, like when it comes to your environment is horrible, like the people around you are negative, when you feel like just everything is just stacked against you, that's how, when you got to learn how to play your cards, man. Like you got to literally take things a day at a time. You have to plan. You have to be patient. You have to be resilient because at the end of the day, man, we all go through it, and it's varying levels to it, right? Which we all know. But at the end of the day, we all go through it, man, and you have to learn how to fail appropriately. Is really what we're talking about. All right. So that was my first piece of evidence. I thought that was a great article talking about, hey, it's natural, man. Just as natural as trying to walk, as animals who can fly learn how to fly. Like we're gonna fail over and over, but the biggest thing, you got to get back up. How many times have you heard that? All right. All right. So let's go on to our second piece of evidence of the impact of failure on us. All right. All right, so let's get into our second piece of evidence. So we're still talking about the impact of failure, and to be honest with you, with this second piece of evidence, which is from a platform called Grunge, I want to say we never used it, but it sounds kind of familiar. But the title of it, "What Failure Does to Your Body According to Science," I had no idea that failure literally had a physiological impact on your body. So this is news to me. So let's go ahead and get into it um, and see what they got to say. If at first you don't succeed, try again, or so the old saying goes. I'm pretty sure we all heard that saying before. But whether we like it or not, we can't be good at everything. And despite our best efforts, we just might fail at some things we try to accomplish. As anyone who's fallen short on a task can attest, failure feels bad. It can be demoralizing, embarrassing, and sad. It can also feel stressful. But it is really true that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Absolutely. And I think we all realize that some things just come natural to us, right? Um, and we usually say it's your God given talent. That's usually what you hear, right? Like something you just don't have to work as hard, but you still have to practice and get better. But something just comes a little bit more easier than others. Some things that you want to do, you really have to put in the extra effort, and you're gonna fail more, right? So I think that tends to be the discouraging part when it comes to failure when you're really trying hard and you don't see the results. So at least that's what I think. You can always let me know what you think. According to the Institute for Educational Advancement, there is a quantifiable physiological response to failure, the mirror image of what happens in our bodies and minds when we find success. But failure also helps us learn, according to Reader's Digest Canada. Understanding what our minds and bodies go through when we fail helps improve the odds on a second effort. If you found yourself overwhelmed by consistent setbacks, science shows us there are a few simple steps you can take to retrain your brain, pick yourself up, and start again. So there is something called a winner effect. I know how I feel when I win. And I want to win again and again and again, right? Because that is my focus, is to win, right? Say what you want to. We are competitive people, especially men, right? I want to win. So bump all that you learn from a loss type stuff. Nah, bruh. To understand what failure does to our body, it's helpful to first know what happened to us when we succeed. According to Forbes, science has a term for it, the winner effect. Taken from the 2012 Ian Robinson book, The Winner Effect, How Power Affects Your Brain. As Forbes writes, when we succeed at something, really anything we set out to accomplish, our brains and body are flooded with dopamine, serotonin, endorphins, all things that give us a euphoric feeling, leading us to want to get back out there and try that thing we're good at again. Because when it makes us feel good, we stick to it, and inevitably we get better. Absolutely. And I think people feel the same way as making money, right? Like when you get that first large paycheck, you like, man, like I can go do this, that, like it feels good to win. So it makes so much sense. As Psychology Today notes, sufficient amounts of glucose in our diet affects cognitive function, eating better, thinking better, and succeeding. When viewed from an evolutionary perspective, that all makes sense. We seek out and repeat tasks we're good at, and over time, we get better at them. In doing so, neural pathways are formed and deepened in our brain, helping us feel more confident and assured. It's how we grow and learn, and it's also a natural fail-safe mechanism to encourage us to do all the stuff we need to get done to survive. But what happens though when things don't go as planned? Like success, when we fail, our brains are bombarded with a chemical cocktail. Just this time, a different mixture. So, which that is interesting because, like, I don't think we understand how potent and how powerful our hormones are, right? They mentioned dopamine, serotonin. Of course, we get estrogen, progesterone, we get testosterone, and we got a whole host of other hormones that literally are what a lot of us will call instructions to our body, right? Our hormones, and of course, we get our sex hormones. A lot of us are familiar with that, right? But our hormones literally dictate a lot of things that go on in our brain, a lot of things that go on physically with our bodies. And it's just amazing at the fact that success and failure actually has this impact on our body. Like, so you learn something new every day, right? That's what I'm here for. Losing doesn't feel good for a reason. Instead of feel good chemicals, when we fail, our brains are flooded with cortisol, the stress hormone. Cortisol triggers the fight or flight response to regulate feelings like disappointment and shame, all common enough emotions after we experience failure. When we're in high stress state, our lower brain takes over the driver's seat from our upper cognitive function. As a result, we become more emotional and reactive, usually involuntary. Though some people might be motivated by those feelings, we tend to dwell on real or perceived failures, recreating the chemical reaction in our minds and bodies, deep into those neural pathways. And just like in the last episode, we talked about, like, are things real or not? When you perceive something, it doesn't matter if it's real. Your body feel like it's real. So those hormones are going to take over, right? So this is the tricky part when it comes to reality versus perception, right? Like sometimes your brain and your body don't know the difference. To overcome failure, it's best to reframe those feelings in our brain. Set small goals, earn your dopamine reward, and slowly that physiological response will fade. According to the Hartmanity, everyone experiences failure from time to time. It's important not to suppress your feelings, but to try and learn them rather than dwell on what went wrong. Your goal is to rewire your brain's expectation that your efforts will yield progress. Even through increasing challenges, you need to really want that goal. This is not the time to challenge yourself with something you feel you should do, but won't really look forward to doing. Instead, select the goal that you would enjoy and route in that finish. I would say, and I think this is all because it goes into another article. I don't know why they put two articles on the same page, but and I really think that we don't understand the power that our thoughts have, right? Like we can really, because any goal that I've ever set for myself, I've achieved it because I put a plan in place, right? I put goals in place as far as time restraints and things of that nature. So, like, we can literally retrain ourselves based on our habits, our patterns, and our trends in order to get the most effective response when it comes to our lives. So, like, when I always say, man, it's your mentality, man. You have to adjust and adapt and change your mentality. Until you do that, things are going to go awry, right? And I also say I have stresses just like anybody else, but I don't get stressed because I plan, I prepare, right? When people talk of anxiety and being depressed, like I just don't know that. And I'm not saying I'm better than anybody else. All I'm saying is those feelings do not overcome me because I'm always thinking ahead. I'm always putting things into perspective. I'm putting failure and success in different boxes. And I'm understanding that both of those boxes going to get checked. So um, that's our second piece of evidence. I thought that was some good information. I hope you did too. Let's move on to our third piece of evidence. All right, so let's get into our third piece of evidence, which this piece of evidence so happened to kind of piggyback off the last one because I know they mentioned humanity in the last article. So we actually it's covering the platform. First time using it, of course. And this title is "What Happens in Your Brain When You Fail." All right, so we went from kind of the body. Now we're gonna focus on the brain aspect. So y'all know I love some science, man. So science and history, that's me right there. You might never fail on the scale I did, but some failure in life is inevitable. It is impossible to live without failing at something, unless you live so cautiously that you might as well not have lived at all. In which case, you fail by default. J.K. Rowling. At one stage or another, we all have experienced failure. It often invokes a negative emotion, which connotates feelings and ideas of defeat, frustration, and disappointment. Failure is subjective, and it really depends on what you classify as failing. Now, that is a great point. That is a great point. Your failure might not be my failure, right? So that's a great point. Most likely, your idea of failure may vary greatly among your parents, neighbors, and friends. But I think we all generally got a good idea of what failure is, right? It The most simplest form is not accomplishing your goal. Like if I said that I'm gonna run a mile in 8 minutes and I did it in 12, that's failure because of the goal that I set, right? But it might not be failure to somebody else. So, I mean, that makes sense. Generally speaking, it can be defined as a state or condition of not meeting or achieving an objective as you had tended. See, and I promise I didn't read this. Boy, we be in sync, man. We be in sync. Um, there are a number of reasons and events which can lead us to feel this way. For example, failing a course in college, being overlooked for a promotion at work. I know all too well about that. Are just two out of 100 reasons that may lead you to feel like you have failed. What's important to know here is that you are not alone. As human beings, we make mistakes. Failure is a part of life, especially if you're trying new things and attempting challenges you haven't tackled before. The bottom line is that failure is what you make it. It is important to understand why these feelings around failure occur, what happens in our brains when they do, and how to tackle them head on. So I will say there are people that don't handle failure well, don't handle rejection well. And it's because that it's not because people think that they're supposed to succeed at everything. It's just that it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good to fail. It doesn't feel good to get rejected. It doesn't feel good to get your feelings hurt because at the end of the day, that's what failure does. It hurts your feelings. All right. When it comes to understanding failure, we first have to understand why we are scared of failing. A study titled Enhanced Risk Aversion, but not Loss Aversion in Unmedicated Pathological Anxiety, conducted by researchers for the Institute of Neuroscience at the University College in London, did just that. The study tested whether pathological anxiety is something that makes us more afraid of failing, or is fear caused because we are unaware of what will happen. For example, a student studying for her degree may fear failing. However, the underlying fear is that she doesn't know what will happen or what she will do after she failed her exam rather than the act of failing itself. The study concluded that the findings indicate that the success of these interventions may not be so much about desensitizing individuals to the object of their fears, but rather showing them that they can successfully navigate past them. Now, and I want to say that I think most things are fear based, right? When people say God fearing, right? They letting you know that hey, the underline is what would happen if I don't fear him? Or what would happen if I don't believe in God? What would happen if I fail this test? What would happen if I do this, do that? So much of what drives us is based out of fear. And to me, that is not a way to live, man. Like, I don't live based off fear. I live based off success. I live based off innovation. I live based off of helping others. I live based off information. Like, I just like As the saying goes, the only thing fear is fear itself. But why even fear fear? You know, like it's gonna happen. Why am I gonna fear something that's gonna happen? I'm gonna get happy. I'm gonna get sad. Why would I fear it? So when it happens, then it just happens. It's momentarily. We have to retrain that brain. I'm telling you. Um, the science behind failure, like all emotional feelings, feeling that something triggers a series of events and chemicals in our brains. Feeling such a disappointment, anxiety, and shame may arise if you're experiencing failing. Um, when we experience a win, our brain releases endorphins, dopamine, and serotonin. Kind of what the last one said. So we're gonna move on. Um, Failure can help your brain grow. On the outside, failure can help feel final and seem like the end of the world as you know it. But as it turns out, what do you do with your failure afterward is the important part. Research from the University of South Carolina used MRIs of 28 subjects around the age of 26 who were asked a series of challenging questions. If the subject got an answer wrong, they will win money. If they got an answer right, they will win money. If they got an answer wrong, they would lose money. The results of the research show how the human brain learns in two different ways when you experience failure. Oh, let's see. We got avoidance learning, train the brain to avoid making mistakes. This is seen as a negative experience, which punishes the brain. So you try to avoid failure. Reward-based learning. Reward-based learning happens when making a mistake rewards us as the brain learns from its failure. It's reinforced process that occurs when someone gets the answer right. Or I could see when it comes to sports, right? Or when it comes to education, right? Okay, I got this wrong, but if I find out why I got this wrong, I can get extra points, right? That's reward. We talk about punishments and rewards all the time, especially when it comes to education. And that's all I'm gonna read, man. I That was interesting. I thought the last one was a little bit more, beneficial when it comes to information, but that understanding that how we kind of view failure, and everybody is different, right? I always talk about levels, um, but you would fare better if you understood that, hey, failure is like, and I actually look at it this way too, like there is no losses, there's only lessons. And I know I said earlier that I want to win, which is true. I still want to win, right? But yes, you can lose, but what you're supposed to do, particularly because I coached for 9 years, right? So guess what? When you take a loss, what do? You go to the film, you study the film, you look at what you did wrong. But what people typically don't do, and I have to admit this myself, well, when you win, you feel so good about winning, you often still don't do the same things as if you have lost. You still should be looking at film. You still should be figuring out, well, what did I do right? And what things in the win did I do that I could still work on to make sure that I win again the next time, right? That's how we should be viewing failure, in my humble opinion. All right. All right. So that was evidence number 3. We're going to wrap it up. I got one more piece of evidence for you, and then we're going to wrap this episode up. All right.
In a 2019 study, over 400 participants were enlisted to learn a mysterious, invented language. Individuals were asked about 3 pairs of runes. For example, which of these 2 characters represents an animal? Then, after a brief break, they were asked about the same rune pairs with questions flipped. As in, which of these 2 runes represents a non-living object? But this game had a secret. The subject's answers in round 1 determined the rune's meanings in round 2. In the first round, participants either had all their answers marked as correct, no matter what, or they were forced to fail every question. This meant that at the break, every participant had the same amount of information, and in round 2, they were playing for real. But despite this even playing field, the successful participants from round 1 rose to the top of the ranks, while those cast as failures kept, well, failing. People often describe failure as a teachable moment, a necessary stumble on our way to improvement. But learning from our mistakes isn't always easy, especially when those failures are demoralizing, overwhelming, or just downright confusing. So, what exactly prevents us from turning our mistakes into mastery? Perhaps the most obvious hurdle to learning from failure is how painful it can be. People generally want to think of themselves as capable and competent, and experiencing failure threatens that self image. In a survey following a replication of the Rune study, participants in the failure group indicated much lower levels of self confidence after participating. It's tempting to dismiss this pain as a temporary setback, but some studies have found that when people feel demoralized or incompetent, their brains often stop processing new information. This suggests that if a threat to your self-esteem is large enough, it can undermine your ability to learn. However, your tolerance for failure also depends on your relationship with the task at hand. In a study from 2011, researchers surveyed a group of American students enrolled in introductory and advanced French courses. These students completed a questionnaire asking what kind of teacher they preferred: one who emphasized their strengths and successes, or one who highlighted their mistakes and corrected their weaknesses. In general, responses showed that while beginner students sought positive reinforcement, advanced students were more eager for critical feedback. Researchers have theorized a handful of explanations for these results. Having just started out, beginners are still determining if they enjoy learning French and if they want to continue studying. So they might crave praise as a way to stay motivated. On the other hand, the advanced students are already invested, so they may want to improve their skills as efficiently as possible. The process of gaining expertise also comes with its fair share of failure, so the advanced students may have built a higher tolerance for making mistakes. But whether you're an expert or a novice, it's usually much more straightforward to learn from your successes than your failures. For example, imagine getting your grade back on an exam. If you aced it, you could reasonably assume you made good choices around when, what, and how much to study, and you can replicate those decisions for the next test. But if you failed, it could be for any number of reasons. Maybe you didn't study enough. Maybe you studied the wrong information. Or maybe you did everything right and the test covered things you shouldn't have been expected to know. In cases like this, it's unclear exactly what went wrong, making it difficult to learn how to improve. Wanting to learn from our failures is completely natural, and there's a lot to gain by being resilient and cultivating a growth mindset. But fixating on your failures can make it easy to forget all your successes. And building on what you're doing right can be more effective than focusing on what you did wrong. One of the ways we can be more constructive with ourselves is by considering how
All right, there you have it. That was my piece of evidence number 4. I thought that I love TEDx, by the way, videos. I can't wait to be featured on there one day because I know it's coming, right? So but I thought that was a great breakdown on like how people view failure. And I know they gave a lot of examples that was in the educational space because it lends itself very well because I'm in the educational space and I see all the time people get so discouraged and kids will give up, right? Because of failure, because they fail tests all the time, quizzes, they don't do well on assignments. They really haven't A lot of kids are not reading on grade level. They not writing on grade level. So what's happening is they just getting passed on. So like it's almost this buildup of failure, right? And a lot of them have given up. So we have to give people success, or we have to get people to a level where they can look at failure as just part of the journey. It's a part of the process, right? And when you do fail, okay, now let's break it down and figure out why did we do that. That has to be a part of the process, right? For too long, we are letting failure to cripple us, right? And to the point where we want to give up and we don't want to do it. No, that's not what failure is meant for. Failure is meant for us to take it get better, and make us better, right? So I thought that was a great video. Man, hopefully you appreciate this episode because I thought it was beneficial for me doing the research on it, man. Like, because it gave me another perspective on failure, even though I handle failure pretty well. But it just gave me another perspective. So hopefully it gave you a different perspective on failure and the impact of it on your life. As always, I appreciate y'all rocking with me, man. Make sure y'all share the video, like the video, leave me any comments, man. Let me know how things are going, man. I want to hear from you. You know, um, you already know where the links will be. I don't have to even keep on telling you, man. So, hey, as always, I am you. You are me. Love always, love eternal. Remember, the worst thing you can do is lie to yourself, and I think we just made that case, baby. All right, deuces. One love.